from New York City at the top of the hour, every weekday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The Fourth Branch presents discussions, debates, commentary on social, political issues, current events, sports, entertainment, religion, education, science, and every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation on controversial issues such as abortion, homosexuality, war on blacks. Are Republicans dumber than Democrats? Information which might irritate you, make you cry, make you laugh, but above all, will make you smarter. Join us every time. It is the right thing to do. It is the only way to keep your sanity in a world of chaos, hypocrisy, immorality, and deception. Welcome to Common Sense. Welcome to the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. This is segment 2 for the day. I am MD. If you join us for the first time, welcome. I'm glad you're here. If you've been here before, I once again welcome you and appreciate you being here. Today, in this segment, we are going to talk about something kind of veer away from our regular segment. Earlier in segment 1, we read the Mueller report. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what triggered the report. What was the report generated for? Now, it may sound like a dumb question, since we already know who created the report, and we already know most of the reasoning, the rationale behind the report. But we're going to look at the report through the prism of some interesting rationale. But first, let me give you a couple of related news. We have the Judiciary Committee. Now, you know, since the 2018 midterm election, the House has changed hands. Before the 2018 midterm election, the Republican control all levers of government. The executive branch, which is the presidency, the president's office, the legislative branch, comprising of 2 houses, 2 chambers, lower chamber, which is Congress, and of course the Senate. And you have, of course, the judiciary branch, which is the Supreme Court. Now, the first 2 years of Trump administration, because the Republican controlled both houses, I shouldn't say because, and the reason is because when the framers of the Constitution crafted the Constitution the way it was crafted, with 3 separate branches of government, it was crafted that way so that we never have the situation we had in the country. In other words, it really didn't matter whether Democrats or Republicans were in complete control of the legislative branch. That's at least what the framers of the Constitution had in mind. Now, we can fault them today for not having had the prescient science of seeing that at some point in the future, legislators would would shred the Constitution and simply decide to go along with whatever political party they belong to. Now, I personally made the mistake. Of course, we can go as far back and say maybe the framers could not possibly anticipate, could not possibly visualize any such scenario. But I guess I consider myself naive to think that Republicans, legislators, would do the right thing. And I say that I'll explain very shortly what I mean by that. You see, at the time the Constitution was crafted, all the individuals involved in the crafting of the Constitution, they were patriots. They left an environment, I don't know if we can call it political environment, but it was an environment no one had any say over their own life, over his or her own life. The king, the queen decides how you feel about anything in life. And everyone's life was held by a string, in a string, if you like, because if the queen decides that you ought to be put to death, you ought to be put to death. And there is absolutely no one who could do anything about that. Of course, the queen, the king had advisors that they might listen to, maybe. So all those individuals, they escape that environment and they establish in the Newfoundland, America. And they decided from the very onset they're gonna have a form of government in which no individual ever has that kind of power over a whole country. So they crafted the Constitution with 3 equal branches of the government: the executive branch, the president; the legislative branch, which has 2 chambers, Congress, Senate; and the judiciary branch, of course, the Supreme Court, which decide on legal matter, things that either the executive or the legislative branch having trouble really coming to an agreement, then they would go to that 3rd branch to decide, to arbitrate, and that those group of people, those 9 justices, they have the final say over whatever argument happens between various agencies of the government. But there was one thing that was very that drove the framers of the Constitution to believe that they crafted the best Constitution for the country. And indeed, at the time that they did, it was indeed the best form of Constitution. All of them were patriots. In fact, George Washington was the first president of the United States, made it a point not to belong to any political party. You could say he was independent, but he didn't even want to call himself independent. He just didn't want any political party. But there was one common thread among all of those individuals the first few presidents that we had after the independence, and including all the legislators, they had aspiration, don't get me wrong, but they had one common, very strong point in common. The nation comes first, the Constitution comes first, no matter how much fight between different groups. When it comes to the Constitution of the United States, when it came to defending the Republic, when it comes to abide by the Constitution, all political arguments are put aside. So there is no way in the world, they weren't God, they could have predicted, fast forward to 2016, that the country would have a political party not only in control of everything in our government, but also the members, the legislators, would also be a bunch of crooks, scoundrel, selfish individuals who couldn't give a hoot about the country, who couldn't give a damn about the Constitution. And that's the reason we saw that for 2 years, all the Republicans, there was not a single one who could exercise or who could show that he or she is a patriot, who would stand up and say, no, we cannot let that individual destroy our country. Not a single one of them. And we're talking about that before we not even making reference to the investigation. We're talking about in general that the presidency of Donald Trump has defied all aspects of our democracy, all aspects of our freedom, all aspects of the Constitution. Not a single Republican legislator stood up and defending the country. And they have rationale for that too. So yes, the framers of the Constitution couldn't possibly have foreseen that, because they were all patriots and they crafted the Constitution in such a way that if we were to ever have somebody like Donald Trump in the executive office, the legislative branch, Congress and the Senate, no matter which political party its their members belong to, they would put politics aside and defend the country and defend the Constitution. So the framers did not see the Republican we have today coming. They could not possibly have seen that. In other words, the framers of the Constitution could not possibly see we would have at some point the enemy within. And that's the worst enemy to fight, the enemy in your midst, which you have no idea who those individuals are. Well, in our case, we do know it's the Republicans in Washington who simply have resorted to helping the executive branch erode our democracy, trash our Constitution, trample the rule of law, and offer some sort of rationale for doing all that. When the United States got engaged in World War II, and sending troops to Europe to fight the Nazis, there was a a large group of soldiers sent. They were gonna storm the beach of Normandy, France. And it so happened that the United States of America, our armed forces, had enemies within. They sent that message to Germany, and before the soldier even had the opportunity to even shoot, they were still coming out of the boat, and they were just being gunned down indiscriminately. They never even had a chance to even stand up to the Nazis, because there was an enemy within. The reason I tell you that is because you may not understand what those Republicans today are doing to the country. It's always devastating. It's never a good outcome to have individuals within the country who pretend to fight alongside you for the same cause, but their ultimate goal is to destroy. And that's exactly what happened at that time. There were soldiers among our armed forces. Of course, they were there to go and fight with us. That's exactly the idea. We would not know who those were. They were right there pretending to put their gears on and going to fight the Nazis. But they were the one passing the message to the Nazis that we were gonna unload at the beach of Normandy, and the Germans were waiting for the U.S. Army there. That's the worst thing that happened when you have an enemy within. At this point in the history of the United States, the Republican senators and congressmen are the enemy within. And I don't say that lightly as if it's a political argument. So far, they have helped Donald Trump destroy all aspects of our system of government. The Constitution has been shredded. The rule of law has been trampled, and they helping along. The legislative branch primary duty is to exercise oversight on the executive branch, not to side with the executive branch, not to defend the executive branch, not to argue on behalf of the executive branch. Now tell me what you have been seeing for the past 2 years since Donald Trump has been in existence, has been president of the United States. Every single step of the way, every so often they pretend to go against Donald Trump on something that's of really very little or no importance, so that they can show that, well, they're not always doing that. But on matters of extreme importance, such as the Constitution, such as rule of law, such as separating the three branches of the government, they all along on the same wavelength as the executive branch. Yes, folks, the Republicans today are the enemy within, and the devastation to our country when we finally get a chance to get rid of those individuals and take a look, take stock at the damages that they've done. We'll be sorry we didn't do that any sooner. On the beach of Normandy, every single soldier was gunned down without even the chance, because it's one thing, you at war, you're fighting, you're shooting at the enemy is shooting at you, one or the other would fall. That's war. But in that particular case, our soldiers did not have a single chance to fight a single shot, to even fire once. They were simply gunned down because they were waiting for them there. Because there was an enemy that passed the information to German were waiting for them there. It is devastating when you have individuals in your midst who pretend to care for you, who pretend to care for the country, and every one of their action is detrimental for the United States of America. Yes, Republicans are helping. They're not helping in hiding. They brought their light. They helping destroy the very institution that protect the United States of America, the very institution that has made the United States the envy of the world. Yes, the Republicans are doing that. The framers of the Constitution could not have seen that coming. So they relied on the legislative branch. It is clearly outlined in the Constitution of the United States that the role, one of the major roles of the legislative branch, Congress and the Senate, is to exercise oversight on the executive branch, not to defend the executive branch, not to argue in favor of the executive branch, but to exercise oversight. Not only have the Republicans not done that, the first 2 years they were in complete control of all levels of government. Not only they did not do that, but today they're no longer in control of the House. They now working in collaboration with the White House to undermine the Democrats that are trying to do exactly that. You may not like what the legislative branch job is, but that's the job. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, if you stop that, we automatically do not have, we no longer have a democracy in the United States of America. So the Republican legislators, congressmen, senators, they don't do the job that the Constitution asked them to do, but now they are working aggressively to undermine the Democrats that are now doing the job. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. It doesn't matter what your argument is as far as what the Democrats are doing. And it doesn't matter the reason they're doing it. Because I heard the argument that it's politics. Of course it is politics. That's what those people are in Washington for. And it doesn't matter because that's the job, to exercise oversight. Think about it this way. If you're being watched everywhere you go, that's oversight. If you're being watched wherever you go, let's say it's the government watching you because they think you have something you're doing that's not right. Let's suppose that's really what the legislative branch job is. Would you care? I wouldn't. I wouldn't care that someone watches me 24 hours a day, no matter where I go. I would not care. You could call the person watching me oversight if you want. That's the job of the legislative branch, to exercise oversight on the executive branch. If the executive branch is not doing anything wrong, oversight would not matter. But that's the job. So you Republicans are always arguing as if you think they shouldn't be doing that. That's what the Constitution of the United States gave them as what to do. The fact that Republicans didn't do it doesn't mean it should be that way. the reason that the country is still a democracy and we still are not under a dictatorship is because we have the structure of our government. So you don't have to like it, but that's what preserves the democracy you have enjoyed for 200 plus years. Sometimes I don't know what to think of those individuals, for people, constituents who may not understand all those things, how the whole system works. Sometimes I feel bad for them, but sometimes I, of course, use insult language to refer to them. But the Republican legislators and congressmen, senators, they know better, which means they simply do not care about the country, because they know this is the job, they know it has to be done, and they have done exactly the same thing when the individual in the Oval Office is a Democrat. So they know that is the job. So they're misleading their constituent, and they're coming with all kind of rationale to prevent the job from being done. Are they for the United States, or do they care about the United States of America? The job is for the legislative branch to exercise oversight on the executive branch, and that's what keeps our democracy the way it is. That's what makes certain that we don't have a dictator in the Oval Office who does anything he wants and doesn't have any price to pay. And as it stands today, because of what Republicans have done for the first 2 years and now continue to do, Donald Trump simply bypassed the whole Constitution in order to do whatever he wants. Now, you may think it's okay, but if you start fast forwarding that type of behavior of a president to the next one and the next one, and sooner or later Congress would not have any role in the country because they cannot control the president anymore, and you would have, in all definition, an authoritarian, courtesy of your Republican legislators. What exactly do Republicans stand for? And I don't mean what they say they stand for, because it's easy for anyone to claim anything. The Bible says words without action are worthless, because I'm tired of my fellow Republican talk all kind of crap, pretend to be patriot, pretend to be Christian, pretend to be fiscally conservative, and yet all the action proves to be just the opposite. What exactly do Republicans stand for? If they cannot stand for the country, they do not stand for the Constitution, they do not stand for the rule of law, then what exactly do they stand for? It is not just politics, folks. Now, there is another flaw that the framers didn't see. I said maybe they didn't see that members of the legislative body of a political party would behave the way Republicans have. Maybe they did. Who knows? So when we come back, we'll show you that maybe they did think of that. Maybe they thought that there is that remote possibility. Not that they would do that themselves, but maybe they thought at some point in the future there would be a bunch of political hacks such as we have today in the Republican Party, people who don't care an iota about the country, who do not care about the Constitution, who do not care about the rule of law. Maybe the framers thought of that. Maybe they had a remedy for it. And that's what we're going to explore when we come back.
if you are a patriot, you cannot not be outraged. Because this is not a matter of being Democrat or being Republican. Because the very reason that our democracy survived is because of that very structure of our government. The minute that you don't have any oversight, then at that point, the idea of democracy in the United States of America ceases to exist. So if you are a Republican and you think it's okay, then you too are no patriot. There is no other word of saying it. No matter what you hear people saying, trying to sugarcoat, trying to go around to explain it to you, that's all it means. If you are okay with what is currently going on with Donald Trump, with the Republican Party, you categorically are not a patriot. And no matter what you think of yourself, you are not a patriot. Because a patriot is someone who would give up, who would make sacrifice sometimes of his or her own life, let alone sacrifice a political party in order to preserve the democracy, in order to preserve the Constitution, in order to preserve the rule of law. So if you cannot do that, don't talk to anyone about being patriot, because you are no patriot.
Before we take a look at the next segment of the thinking of the framers of the Constitution, let's take a look at a couple of items that's making news that's relevant to our conversation. We have Hope Hicks. She was the former communication director in Donald Trump administration. You may recall that she left quite a few months ago. Now, she come back in the news because the House Judiciary Committee, who is now in the hands of the Democrat, just subpoenaed her to appear in front of the House in order to clear a few of the items in the Mueller report. The House Judiciary Committee also subpoena Mike Flynn. Mike Flynn is the gentleman third on first row on the far right with the guilty sign in front of him. He too was subpoenaed by the House Judiciary Committee to appear in front of him for some clarification of what they already testify in the Mueller report. Also, at the bottom of the screen on the far right, on the far left rather, third row, first column, with also a guilty plea is Rick Gates. Rick Gates was Paul Manafort deputy manager or assistant manager, if you like. Paul Manafort is the gentleman on the far right on the same row, two rows down from Mike Flynn. So Rick Gates also was subpoenaed by the House to appear in order for the Judiciary Committee to take a look at what they already testify to Robert Mueller in private. Now there are also a number of items that are going on, a number of activities that are currently ongoing in the back end, including subpoena of Trump financial record, of Trump company financial record, all that being worked out in the back end, and some of them already went to court for those information to be provided to Congress in order to take a much deeper look at the level of corruption in the Trump administration. Now, as I said earlier, talking about what the framers of the Constitution had in mind, we are looking at a lot of steps also being taken by those Republicans in order to slow down, in order to derail, in order to really stop altogether this oversight that the Democrats are trying to exercise on the executive branch. Now, politics is politics, but the legislators know that the job, one of the most important jobs of the legislative body, is to exercise oversight on the executive branch. Now, whether you like it or not, or usually nobody does, but that is the job. Now, you remember during the first 2 years, at that time, Republicans were in control of the House, and Devin Nunes was the chair, and he was taking information that he had in his possession and passing it to the White House. Now, he is an individual whose primary job is to exercise oversight on the executive branch, but instead he was collaborating with the executive branch instead of doing the job that he's supposed to do. Now, which brings us to the question, what do Republicans really stand for? Not what they say they stand for, but what do they stand for? What do they stand for exactly, and why did they take that job? Why did they run for public office if they had nothing to offer to the public? Now, the only thing that the Republican legislators have become very good at is lying to their constituent. They have taken a page from Donald Trump, so all they have to do is lie, and they get to keep their job, which will bring me to the next aspect of what the framers of the Constitution must have thought about when they crafted the Constitution, and that is when we return.
In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies presented to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore.
Now, the framers of the Constitution did an excellent job. They really thought through all the various possibilities under the circumstance to begin with, because if you recall that things weren't really completely, we weren't completely at peace, because England was still trying to take possession of that newfound land as an extension of the kingdom. So the framers of the Constitution, not only they had to have, they had to be sleeping with one eye open, because at any point in time, England, which was better armed than they were, could decide to come back and overcome them, kill most of those leaders, and make that Newfoundland, America, an extension of the kingdom. So the framers of the Constitution decided, we're not going to let that happen. So not only they fought to push back against the kingdom, but they also quickly tried to craft a constitution that gave legitimacy to that new form of government, to that new country, America. So they thought, really, they did a fantastic job. They had a lot of brand behind them. So they figured there is the executive branch, the President of the United States, who ultimately represent the country on the international stage. The President has a job to do to run the country, and he has a lot of resources that he can use. And because of the position of the power that comes with the position, the framers of the Constitution saw a silver lining, not only in terms of having the legislative branch exercise oversight on the executive branch, but in order to make that possible and to force the issue, the framers of the Constitution decided also to give Congress the power of the purse. And there are plenty of reasons behind it, but one such reason we can think of today is the fact that if you're trying to exercise oversight on the executive branch and the executive branch is not budging, then you can use the power of the purse to force him. Meaning the president had to go to Congress, had to go to the legislative branch to ask for money to spend. Now the president does have a few discretionary maneuver spending that he can make in order to get some money somewhere, but that's not sustainable. Congress ultimately approve a budget, and the Senate, of course, confirm. So the legislative branch can force the executive branch in terms of an executive branch not cooperating with the legislative branch, which the framers of the Constitution suspected that could happen. That you have someone in the Oval Office who feel that he is the king of the town and he can do whatever he wants. Now, with the legislative branch having not only the power to exercise oversight, but also has the ability to force the executive branch of going along with the exercising of the oversight. Meaning, the legislative branch could tell the executive branch, you either have to comply or you won't get any money for your budget, for your proposal. and that should definitely get the executive branch attention. That's one way of doing it. But I suspect that it wasn't really the route that the framers of the Constitution wanted to take when it comes to the legislators. Because, as I mentioned earlier, there is no way in the world that the framers of the Constitution could have suspected that you would have members of a political party, all the members of a political party, completely relinquishing their duty, but even worse, working to undermine the Constitution of the United States. There is no way in the world that I think the framers could have seen that, but maybe they did. And I said maybe they did because the way that they have the election of individual in Congress is such a way to that there are always overlap between election every 2 years. And the framers must have thought that the people, we, the people, would be engaged, that's the way it was then, would be engaged in such a way that we would never allow any legislator to take the country down the path it is in today. They must have thought the people were smart. They must have thought the people could see through those kind of things when the legislators are not doing their job. But they could not fast forward to 2016 to see that the constituent of a political party, all the Republicans, constituent of a political party, could also in the same boat as their legislators. I don't think they could foresee that. That you would have not only the legislators completely abandoning their primary duty, lying to their constituent, misleading them. They could not see Fox Network coming either. They could not possibly envision that there would be a network, news, which call itself news, that would be a propaganda machine that would deceive the constituent. They could not possibly have seen that. But forget about Fox. Fox is in business. But the legislators whose primary job is to exercise oversight, whose primary job is to actually instruct and educate their constituent, they're the one misleading them. They could not possibly see that coming. But worse, they could not see the constituent would become so dummified that they cannot see that they've been misled. That's the ultimate of the big problem in America. Because it's one thing that someone lies to you, because a politician come and say, I'm going to Washington, I'm going to defend your interests, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. There is no way you can tell whether the person is lying or not. Okay. But what the framers could not see is that constituent would continue to support the individual even after finding out that the individual is not fit to be in that position.
people who support Donald Trump try to defend him. Oh, yeah, I know. He say a few lies here and there. He doesn't say a few lies here and there. Donald Trump is a liar, a professional liar, a serial liar. Not a few lies here and there. You may not want to admit it because for some reason you think it's okay for the president of the United States to be such a serial liar. But Donald Trump doesn't say a few lies here and there. Every time, in fact, since Donald Trump has been in the Oval Office, my way of knowing what is not true is to listen to him. I don't have to analyze what Donald Trump says. We already know that 90-95% of the time, whatever Donald Trump say would be just the opposite. Donald Trump doesn't have the concept of truth. In fact, I even believe Donald Trump believes the lie that he's telling people. And that's the greatest danger. Because if he believes what he's saying, then this is a problem. So the framers of the Constitution had no idea that, or could not foresee that all the members, because you can always have some members, you would always find that, because there will always be people who pretend to want the advancement of the country, people who pretend to be in the same wavelength as the rest of us. There will always be that. So I'm certain that the framers of the Constitution knew or thought that yes, we may have some enemy within in our midst, but they could never visualize that all the members of a political party could be that enemy. They could not possibly have visualized that. But that still could have been a problem that could have been fixed had the people, because that's my suspicion, that the framers of the Constitution thought, well, if for some reason, if for some rare possibility that all the members of a political party were to betray the country, as the Republicans have been doing for the past couple of years, then the people would be smart enough to fix that problem. But they could not anticipate that the people would have been so dumbified. All the constituents in the Republican circle have become so dumb that they're willing to continue to support the very individual that are destroying the country. The framers of the Constitution could not have seen that. No, they could not. There is no way in the world that I can bet. I would like any historian to prove me wrong that the framers of the Constitution could see that the legislators could get to that point of betraying the country, and the constituent could have become so dumb that they too would go along with it. I don't buy that. I don't think the framers could have foreseen that, could have anticipated that. All the members of a political party, all the constituents of a political party, all the members, they have abandoned their job. They have relinquished their duty. They have betrayed the country. Now, it is already a far cry to believe that you could have that, let alone having all the constituents. We're talking about millions of people who are so ignorant, so naive, that they all fall for the lies,
for the deception, for the corruption, and they're willing to go along with that. That is unbelievable. In 2018, Democrats and quite a few independents went to the poll to change the House hands. But it's obvious the Republicans did not participate in getting rid of those individuals who are helping to destroy the country, because the Senate still belong to the Republican, which means the Republican constituent, so no problem. Devin Nunes still has his job. Mitch McConnell still has his job. Lindsey Graham still has his job. Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, all those people still have their job, and yet they are at the forefront helping to erode our democracy. They helped Donald Trump really pretty much trash our Constitution and trample the rule of law. So which means that tells me that the Republican constituent, they're either too naive, too gullible, or completely ignorant to see that what their legislators are doing. They had the opportunity to change that. They had that opportunity. They did not change it. They can give you all kind of rationale. Anybody, even the devil, can rationalize being the devil, and we'll put it in such a way you'll love it. What do Republicans stand for?
Ignorance, they say, is the biggest threat to any democracy. Indeed, it is. Plato, a Greek philosopher born in 427 BC, said that ignorance is the root and stem of all evil. Today, members in the Republican Party wear ignorance as a badge of honor, while the rest of the country watch powerless the destruction of a country which was once the envy of the world. The media is the enemy of the country, said Donald Trump. The Democrat legislators are obstructionists for not going along with everything the president wants. The Department of Justice is biased for investigating corruption in the Trump administration. This is the United States of America. Any question? Donald Trump is wrong to call the media the enemy of the people. Throughout history, dictators, authoritarians have always tried to delegitimize the media in order to get away with corruption, scandal, and yes, even abuse. Adolf Hitler did exactly the same thing in 1933, accusing the media of fabrication. Journalists are not in the business of fairness. Our only business is to be objective. It is our duty to hold Trump and every administration accountable. Today, it is urgent. It is necessary It is critical of every freedom it depends on.
If you are an American and you are a patriot, you cannot possibly not be outraged by the state of the country for the past 2 years. Some argue that Donald Trump is the greatest thing that has happened since sliced bread. They quote a number of things. The economy is great, the Wall Street is doing great. What not to like? Sometimes I wonder what exactly is the most important to individuals. Those who call themselves patriots don't care about patriotism if they can have money. Those who call themselves Christian don't care an iota about Christianity if they can make some money or if they can enrich themselves. Maybe that's the case. But regardless, the United States of America is no longer the shining city on the hill. Is no longer the leader in the world. In fact, most countries today looking for ways to do things without the leadership of the United States, without even talking to the United States. Donald Trump bid for the office of the presidency using this slogan, "Make America Great Again." It is a slogan, obviously, that was catchy, but a slogan that doesn't really even fit the individual who was using it. Donald Trump, throughout his life, has never been about anything other than himself. We know that. We have the record to prove it. And at no point in his life, his private life, did he even care about anything other than himself. Of course, and his family. As such, it was never a surprise to me personally that Donald Trump would use the office of the presidency to continue to further his own personal gain. And he has. But those in the legislative body, the Republicans, whose job is to exercise oversight, are willing to let all of the corruption happen because, well, you know, it's Republicans. And for the record, Donald Trump is no Republican. He happened to have chosen to be on the Republican camp because that was the only place he could have done what he did. And I read about that exclusively and mentioned that Donald Trump, very smart guy, he's very street smart. He knew that he could not run under the Democrat banner, despite the fact you heard that the Republican always bashing the Democrat for being liberal, for being a party that will accept anything and everything. And it so happened that Donald Trump is so smart, he knew that he would not go anywhere in the Democrat Party because they would not have accepted someone so vulgar, someone so crooked, such a serial liar, a professional crook. So he chose the party that would accept him. As I mentioned in the publication I just put on the peoplebranch.org website, that Russia also knew that Donald Trump would be open to the idea of being helped by a foreign entity because Russia had tried 3 times and offer the same opportunity to Democrat candidates, and all 3 times Democrats have replied no, but no thank you. At the first time that Russia tried a Republican, they succeeded. So you see, Republicans love labels. They're Christian conservative, they're fiscally conservative. According to the Mueller report, NRA was used by Russia as a back channel to funnel $30 million to the Trump campaign. Talking about Republican core values. Yes, labels are great. But what do Republicans stand for exactly? Not what they say they stand for. We know what they say they stand for. But what do they really stand for? Because everything that's corrupt, everything that's bad, everything that you would not want to be associated with, they embraced it because it helps them advance their political career. They deceive their constituent. They have ways with rationale. They know all they have to do is muddle the issue and they get reelected, but without having to offer anything to their constituent. And so far, the country has been going down because our level of morale, our level of decency is really at a low point. And the integrity of the leaders, the president in particular, is non-existent. But, as the Republicans say, that is the best thing that has happened to them since sliced bread. The 2020 presidential election ought to be looked at by Republicans, those who still have some shred of decency, those who still believe that patriotism is way better than anything else any man or any political party can offer. That would be your chance to redeem the United States of America from those individuals who do not care what happened to the country. They call themselves patriot, of course. They call themselves fiscally conservative, of course. They call themselves Christian, naturally. But what do they really stand for? Thank you for watching. I hope you have a good afternoon or a good evening, whichever it happened to be. Join me again tomorrow at 10 a.m. on our first segment, in which we will be continuing with the reading of the Mueller report. I am Mike Duchesne, your host for the Fourth Branch. Good day. That was an update through the prism. That was an update through the prism of common sense. Join us again tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. Send us comments, criticism, suggestion, or simply let us know how we're doing. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful afternoon. See you next time.
The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.